Romans 15 verses 25 to 29. A gospel that gives ministry, mission, and mutual blessing. The gospel does not only proclaim salvation, it produces a people shaped by sacrifice. Paul, nearing the close of this majestic epistle, has traversed the peaks of justification by faith, union with Christ, and the mysterious grafting of Gentiles into Israel's olive tree. But now, the tone softens. Theology gives way to travel plans. Yet, even here, in the corridors of personal intention, grace does not cease to govern. For what we see in these verses is a life gripped by gospel ambition and governed by gospel affection. Paul's ink is not spent casually. His plans are the outflow of his theology. He writes of collections, journeys, and mutual refreshment. But behind these ordinary acts is an extraordinary Christ who shapes the affections of a redeemed people. The gospel of grace births a community of generosity, a heart for mission, and a longing for mutual blessing in Christ. First, a community of generosity, Paul's immediate ministry to the saints. At present, however, I am going to Jerusalem in a ministry to the saints, verse 25. Paul begins not with Spain or Rome, but Jerusalem, a destination marked not by strategy, but by sacrificial service. The word he uses for ministry is diaconia, a term not merely administrative, but priestly and personal, drawing from the imagery of sacred service. Paul does not consider himself above such acts. To deliver financial relief from the Gentile churches of Macedonia and Achaia to the poor saints in Jerusalem is no distraction from his apostolic calling. It is a necessary fruit of the gospel. These Gentile believers, Paul notes, have shared in Israel's spiritual things, ton pneumatikon, verse 27. The salvation they enjoy was promised to Abraham. The Messiah they worship is the offspring of David. They are wild branches grafted into Israel's cultivated root, Romans 11 verse 17. And so, Paul says, it is their duty, aphelizine, a word that connotes obligation, not mere charity, to return love in material form. This is gospel gratitude rendered tangible. The offering is called fruit, karpos, a term pregnant with imagery. As Haldane observes, this is no mere transfer of money. It is the outgrowth of grace, the evidence of life in the vine. Paul aims to seal this fruit, verse 28, using sphagizo, a word drawn from the marketplace, referring to stamping a cargo as official and approved. Paul desires not simply to deliver the money, but to ensure that the gift is complete, acceptable, and received in unity and love. Second, a heart for mission, Paul's aspiration to reach Spain via Rome. After I have sealed to them this fruit, I will set out by way of you to Spain, verse 28. Though Jerusalem lies ahead, Spain burns in Paul's heart. His ambition, stated earlier, verse 20, is to preach Christ where he is not yet known, to break ground where no other man has laid a foundation. This is not wanderlust, but holy ambition. He is not weary of known fields, but bound by a burden for the unreached. As Calvin reflects, this passage shows us a man governed not by whim, but by providential longing, planning with urgency, but submitting to the Lord's will. Rome, then, is not the destination, but a waypoint. Yet it is a precious one. Paul hopes to be helped on my way there by you, propemptenai, a term that implies financial, spiritual, and logistical support. But even more, he longs to be refreshed by their fellowship, verse 32, a soul-renewing communion with brothers and sisters who share in the same gospel hope. Mission is not a lonely endeavor. Paul seeks rest not in retirement, but in relationship. Third, a longing for mutual blessing, the fullness of the gospel and community. I know that when I come to you, I will come in the fullness of the blessing of Christ, verse 29. This is no empty optimism. Paul expects that his coming to Rome will not be transactional, but transformational. He will not arrive depleted, but in the fullness, pleroma, of gospel blessing. What is this fullness? It is not mere information about Christ, but the very presence and power of Christ ministered through word, spirit, and fellowship. It is the shared joy of believers whose hearts have been knit together by sovereign grace. Commentators like Moo and Schreiner emphasize that this blessing is both apostolic and communal. It is the overflowing abundance of what Christ has done and continues to do among his people. Paul brings the gospel not as a merchant peddling wares, but as a father bearing riches for the family of God. The anticipated exchange is mutual. He will give, but he will also receive. He will refresh, but also be refreshed. This longing for mutual strengthening is not sentimental. It is deeply spiritual. In the koinonia of the saints, burdens are lifted, hope is rekindled, and the embers of mission are fanned into flame again. Reflections for today. This brief passage, easily overlooked among Paul's travel notes, becomes a window into the living anatomy of gospel-shaped ministry. It invites us to ask, what governs our plans? What fuels our ambitions? What refreshes our souls? In a world of platform building and personal advancement, Paul shows us a better path, the joy of gospel generosity. His trip to Jerusalem was no grand stage, but a lowly road of service. Yet there, in the delivery of simple gifts, gospel unity came alive. How different might our churches be if we saw our giving not as an expense, but as fruit, proof of life, joy, and thankfulness. Paul's yearning for Spain also rebukes our complacency. So many remain unreached, not because Christ is unwilling, but because we are too easily satisfied. Paul's ambition was not to build a following, but to follow Christ to forgotten fields. Do we dare ask where Christ is not yet known in our city, our neighborhood, our generation? And finally, there is the longing for mutual blessing. Paul was no lone ranger. He hungered for refreshment, not through distraction, but through gospel-saturated fellowship. In an age of burnout and spiritual weariness, could it be that what many need most is not another program, but the presence of another pilgrim, someone with whom to share the fullness of Christ? The gospel of grace creates such a people who give joyfully, go willingly, and gather meaningfully. It crafts not consumers, but contributors, not wanderers, but worshipers, not spectators, but saints who strengthen one another as they await the final sealing of all fruit when Christ comes again in glory. Conclusion. In Romans 15 verses 25 to 29, Paul teaches us that the gospel travels not only through preachers and pulpits, but through offerings, travel plans, and shared meals. Grace does not rest idle. It moves toward need, toward mission, toward one another. And in its movement, it leaves behind not just converts, but communities transformed by the power and presence of Christ. Let us be such a people, generous in our giving, bold in our going, and eager in our gathering, all because we have been blessed with the fullness of Christ.